All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Camila Brango. I am the Director of Community at the Center for Communication. And for some of the students that are unfamiliar with our organization, we're an independent nonprofit that connects students with the best minds in media, like the ones you're going to be hearing from today and get to ask some questions. Before I get started with introducing our panelists, I always like to invite and encourage you all to stay connected with our organization and follow us on Instagram so you can know about all of our upcoming events. Starting with next Monday, I'll be moderating a panel on how to make it in TV in NYC. This is going to be an amazing panel with some of the producers and directors from some of the best shows like Gilded Age and so many more. Then on May 13th, we have an Instagram Live with Jonathan Sim, who is a young journalist and film critic, and he's going to share with you guys how exactly he got started in that awesome field at such a young age. And then last but not least, the last event of our spring and summer season is going to be our 8th annual Media Career Summit on June 10th at Brick. Early bird tickets are out on sale right now, so we encourage you to check out our website, get those tickets quickly, and join us for another day full of networking, opportunities for you to, put your resumes in front of the recruiters and representatives from some of the top media companies. There's going to be workshops and professional speakers like today that are going to share with you the best advice about how you can get started or continue to grow in this wonderful media industry. So now, thank you all for being here. Very excited to have you all here, as well as to our speakers and panelists for joining us. You will also get the opportunity to ask questions to our panelists. And in order for you to ask a question, you must use the raise hand button that is on the reactions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So when it's your turn, I'm going to call on your name and ask that you please have your camera on, unmute your mic, and introduce yourself while you mention what is your name and school that you represent. And then please proceed with your question. We ask that you limit yourself to one question so that many of you or all of you can have the opportunity to ask your questions, and then our panelists can go ahead and ask those questions. So as a reminder, the raise hand button on the reactions, and I'll provide the guidance when you guys can start asking those questions. Thank you all so much. Now, we're excited to be speaking today with the team from DEY. They are an advertising agency with a very unique and mindful approach to working with brands and campaigns that drive social change, impact, and meaningful work. You will have the opportunity to ask questions to our guests, starting with Kavita Tomlinson, who is the Senior Director at DEY, where she manages a diverse range of clients, and she's a communication strategist and a trusted source for DEY clients in media and influence partners alike, driving their thoughtful leadership, promotion, op-ed development, and placement, and premium speaking opportunities. Thank you so much, Kavita, for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Yes. Next, we have Annie Tressler, who has actually attended some of our events in the past and who is an account supervisor at DEY, where she brings the strategic thinking and expert storytelling skills and deep relationships with both digital and broadcast outlets to her work. With a near encyclopedic knowledge of pop culture and the changing media landscape, she offers a fresh perspective to brands and institutions on when and where their voice can be most aptly to meet for the moment. So thank you so much, Annie, for being here with us. Awesome. And last but not least, Nick Augustine, who is account executive at DEY. He's a skilled public relation professional, experienced in relationship building, crafting powerful messages, media relations, and writing. Nick has worked with organizations specializing in environment, economic development, human rights, democracy, etc. So we have a wealth of knowledge here. Thank you so much, Nick, Kavita, and Annie, for joining us today. Very excited to hear a little bit more about you. And I'm just going to start with a quick question before we open it up to our students. I'd love to hear from each one of you. Tell me a little bit more about your career journey. What did you study in college? Where did you go in college? And what inspired you to pursue a career in advertising? And Kavita, I see that you're muted, so if you don't mind getting started.
Yeah, so my journey before DEY is quite long. I'm probably dating myself, but I graduated NYU in 1999, so that's quite a long time ago. But my journey, I guess, starts a little bit earlier than that. So I always loved writing and dreamt of being a journalist. And so I went to the University of New Hampshire for 1 year and then really felt it's a great journalism school, but I kind of wanted to be a little bit more in the thick of things. And so as a sophomore, I transferred to NYU and I'm a graduate of the School for Journalism. And while I was there, I had, through a sort of family connection, it's a very funny, long story. My parents owned a motel in upstate New York, and a frequent guest of ours happened to be in public relations in the city. And she said, if you are interested, we have an internship available for you in the city. So when you land, look me up. And I did because I needed money while I was going to school. And that's kind of how I landed in PR. I, got my degree in journalism, but I had been in PR for a number of years, working at, since the time I was 18, really, and at a small agency. And when I graduated, I sort of had an opportunity at that point to be, to go into journalism full throttle or have the comfort of a job in PR. And I kind of knew what to expect. And I also, along the way, kind of many of my colleagues here will probably attest, I am kind of an introvert. And so I kind of felt a little bit more comfortable doing some of the behind the scenes work versus being that hard hitting reporter that I had imagined myself being at one point in time. And so that's how I got to being in PR. After I graduated, I worked at the same agency for a couple of years. And then I had an opportunity to move to a more mid-sized agency, and that was during the age of the tech bubble. So I had a lot of experience working with technology companies and startups. And then I had moved on from there to Edelman, which is one of the largest PR agencies in the world, and I worked there for a number of years. And then I took a step back after deciding to have a family, and then I freelanced for a bit, and I wound up at DEY because at the time the head of corporate and public affairs, who went on to be the US CEO, had sort of wanted me to come back to Edelman over the years, and I just didn't really want to do the whole agency thing in that way, going to the office every single day. And I was more comfortable, in a remote environment. And I was working at that point for a number of different agencies, but more on the back end to help with like new business proposals, research, and not necessarily media relations that required, set office hours. With two little kids, that was hard. So out of the blue, he also knew Rim Jim Day, who's the head of Day, and he just connected us randomly on by email and said, Rim Jim, you're looking for remote workers. I have someone in mind for you, and the rest is kind of history. And so I've been with Day for almost, I guess, working on 10 years now. And so at Day, we focus on public relations and working with organizations, individuals, and authors on big ideas. And the narrative thread through all of the work that we take on is really focusing on big challenges facing humanity and, ideas to address those issues. So that can span anything from AI and ethics to tackling challenges of global health and healthcare, to philanthropy. And so the way that Day is kind of split out, we have a books division that focuses on a curated selection of 9 to 12 books, big idea books a year. And then what I spearhead is the institutional side with my colleagues, Annie and Nick. And we work with, as I said, philanthropies, academic institutions, think tanks, centers, and so forth on their big ideas. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a framing for who I am. And I live in Westchester now, in upstate New York.
No, so amazing. Thank you so much. Now I feel like I'm glad I'm not alone. We have a very similar career path. So thank you so much for sharing that. Let's go with Annie. We'd love to hear a little bit more about you. Where did you go to school? Tell us a little bit more about your career journey. And then maybe you can also add, what do you do a day?
Great. Yes, thank you so much for having us. Like Camila said, I have gone to so many Center for Communication events and have found it to be such a wonderful resource. So really excited to be on the other end of the panel. So I'm Annie. I went to NYU. I'm from Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is actually a real place. When I was at NYU, I really didn't know what I wanted to do initially. I thought, maybe I would want to go into academia or law. And then I really found this amazing niche in a major called Media, Culture, and Communications. They work really closely with Center for Communications to host events. They're great. And it was such a wonderful major that really forced me to explore how media, tech, ethics, pop culture are all intertwining. So it had a really academic lens. And then I hit the real world and realized I needed to actually apply that and get a job. So I went to get an internship. It was my junior year of college. I was thinking, I don't know what I want to do. It was right after Trump was elected. And since I'm from Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania proved to be such an interesting kind of case study in how everything became so polarized. And, so I went to work in the press office for my senator for a summer. We got a big boot camp and had to work with media relations, had to work on a really fast pace, working in hierarchical institutions. And it was really wonderful. So I came back my senior year realizing that that was great, but I never want to go into politics. And I kept my job at NYU doing research on a very niche topic that's now kind of big. It's on thermal imaging cameras and surveillance. So I worked as a research assistant, and then I also got to work on a big thesis. So I had my head totally in the clouds in this kind of like ivory tower mindset, and I realized I needed to learn practical skills. So I needed to really sharpen that up, and I knew that that's what I needed to get a job that would take my creativity and turn it into process. So I was very lucky during that time that I had a pretty flexible second semester. And from alumni connections at NYU, my boss at NYU was able to connect me with someone who was looking for a research and assistant at the New York Times in the corporate communications department. It was very much like a very lucky situation. A woman was going on maternity leave. They needed someone quickly to cover in during these specific days. The stars really aligned, so I'm just so grateful for that. So I worked 2 full days a week while I was finishing up college and got to like immerse myself into journalism, corporate communications, and all that entails. So internal and external communications. And I stayed there for about 6.5 years. I got to work on so many amazing projects, like proactive projects, like 1619 Project, New York Times Cooking, Wirecutter. And then I really got to cut my teeth doing crisis communications, which is super stressful but fun and really collaborative and fast paced. So working a lot on crisis comms, like I'm sure you saw recently Sarah Palin's case against the New York Times. She lost again. I got to help with the first one. So I got to work with a lot of different people like legal, security, editors on desks. And I always find it so hard to say, how were you a communications person for like a communications company? So we had to get really good at describing what we did. So basically, we were kind of offshoots of the different desks of the New York Times and helping to promote their work outside of the traditional New York Times medium. So we were putting our folks on MSNBC and making sure that they were getting features in New York Magazine and having them be experts on NPR and working to build their profiles as trusted sources. Um, so I did that for 6.5 years. And during that time, I also was really kind of getting the itch myself to get on the writer side. So I was doing some writing and I was able to write a piece for the New York Times, which was one of my like proudest moments since being there. And I decided I wanted to take a little step back and work on freelance writing and see what was out there. I knew that I really needed to diversify what I was working on. I felt so comfortable in this like in-house communications position, and I knew I needed to challenge myself. So I did a lot of freelance writing. I did some freelance comms work for NYU, which was really fun. I'll send you guys some links about some alumni that I wrote, which I think would be really useful. And I came across this position at DEY, which just seemed to be so exciting. It was media relations focused, and it was an account supervisor role working with institutions, philanthropies, think tanks, and I interviewed. It was a wonderful interview process, and it's been about almost 3 months there, and I've been able to really dive in. They've allowed me to be really creative while also really sharpening skills that I never had from my last job, but also, it's been such a wonderful way to mix the skills that I've learned for 6 years and then bring it into my new job. I feel like I'm able to diversify my experience, work on causes that I really care about, and I am able to expand my understanding of comms in a whole new way. So I couldn't be more grateful. And anyway, that is my journey.
So amazing, so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then we'll love to hear, same thing, Nick, a little bit more about your career journey. Where did you go to school? And then, what pushed you to do a career in advertising?
Yeah, totally. So I went to Hunter College. And I started studying politics when I was there. I love the political science department. I got to learn from some really amazing people. And then through the honors program I was in, I more or less like snuck into this higher level course that they were offering through one of the associate colleges, Roosevelt House, about DC journalism. And I thought like this would be interesting. It's something I should know if I want to work in politics. Yada yada yada. It was being a master class run by this woman, Eleanor Clift, who is this older woman in journalism. She was on this like I think MSNBC show a while ago called the McLaughlin Group. Um, but her main claim to fame was really being the first female writer, or one of the first female writers, I should say, at Newsweek, back when Newsweek was truly like the weekly magazine everyone got. Um, and I had not expected to fall in love with journalism the way I did. I mean, it was just a wonderful course. I got to meet really amazing people like Lynn Povich, who led a lawsuit against Newsweek for not allowing female writers because at the time you had female reporters who would go out and do most of the writing, but then it would be bylined under a man's name in the magazine. And Jill Abramson, who was the first female executive editor of the Times. So just like really amazing people that to read amazing stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, should I consider journalism? And from there, went to the registrar's office, added a major, I should say, and dived right in. So I was writing for a newspaper that Hunter College was working with at the time in the South Bronx on local issues there, which was a great way to cut my teeth and really get out there. I'm a kid from Long Island. I had never gone to the Bronx previously, but I was going up once a week and just chatting with people on the street to be like, what are you into? What's up? What's going on? And I really enjoyed that. We did some great stories there. I interned at ABC, ABC New York, on the digital team for a bit, and that was everything from cutting stories from the live broadcast for the news to writing my own stories to going out and doing little on the street production. So I think there's a video where I'm actually on their website about a Swedish candy shop on the Lower East Side. So if you want to go find that, feel free. But then I graduated and I was looking at journalism jobs, and the market was just terrible at the time. This was 2014, I think. No, sorry, 2018. And it was a terrible market. So I was like, well, I don't want to do nothing for a while. So what can I do in the meanwhile? And I came across this PR firm that was working on a lot of issue-focused campaigns. So like Fight for 15, a lot of the nonprofits in New York. And I applied for an entry-level job there and said, you guys are working with a lot of great movements. I would love to be a part of this. And I got the job, but they had moved me over to real estate, which was not my jam. it was really interesting, and I think, you know, I'm very happy that I did stay, because they said, you know, we're moving departments. If you want to keep the job, great. If you don't want to keep it, no harm, no foul. Um, but I decided to keep it. I'm really happy I did, because it was a lot of those like basic skills um, of PR, because of all right, journalism and PR are kind of two different sides of the same coin. The writing can sometimes be a bit different, and there can be a struggle there. So I stayed. I got those skills. Eventually, I came across another promising opportunity outside Poughkeepsie at a ecological research center focused on ecosystems and working with scientists. Um, and I took it because why not? The pandemic kept me there a bit longer than I intended. Um, but it was a really great position. Really learned how to work with people who have such an in-depth knowledge of their subject area that you have to get a whole new set of skills learning how to like move them back into being a bit wider of a focus. Moved back to New York, got a job at a small communications firm working with local nonprofits again. And these were mostly direct service organizations. So Big Brothers Big Sisters, folk based in New York, a firm that was working with first generation college students, help them get internships in major banks and law firms, companies like that. And it was really great, loved it. But I got a LinkedIn message from this guy, Peter, one day, who said, you know, I work with this organization called DEY. They're working on big ideas and big challenges facing humanity. They're looking for someone like you. Do you want to have a chat? And we did. And I think within like 2.5 weeks, I found myself meeting Kavita in a co-working space in Midtown New York, and I had just taken this job. So it was really wonderful. I've got to know a lot at DEY. I think I've really grown there. The clients have just been truly phenomenal, and getting to work with and learn from all these different amazing organizations, from the Gates Foundation to the Rockefeller Foundation, working on issues with climate and women, global health. I mean, it's just really been a wonderful experience. And I've been there for about 3 years. So really enjoying it.
Wow, amazing. I love everybody's story, and especially because, you know, I think we all intertwine in starting in journalism and writing, and then little by little you find the segues and transfer those skills into something else in advertising. So I love that. That's awesome. So, you know, I want to get our students ready to ask their questions, given that this is their space and their time to speak with you all. So I'm gonna, you know, point it out if you guys can start using the raise hand button under, you know, reactions on your Zoom screen. So you can start coming up to ask your questions. And as I'm seeing some of the questions being raised, then please make sure please make sure to turn on your camera, introduce yourself, mention your school. If you have a direct questions to one of our panelists, you can mention it. If not, you know, our panelists will take turns into answering these questions. Awesome. So I see Nicole Leontos raise her hand.
Hi. I don't know if you can see me or not.
We're not able to see you, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay. My camera's on. Hello?
Okay. Might
Well,
be an issue, but it's okay. We can hear you well.
okay. My name is Nicole. I go to Fordham University. I am a psychology major, and as of this year, I'm a minor in marketing. And like I just mentioned, I just started my minor in marketing. How did you guys know, or did you guys go through any, okay. Did you guys go through any changes or doubts before deciding that you wanted to go the advertising route? Like, I know some of you said how you got these internships when your junior year and so on. So were you always very like adamant on that one career path, or did you feel like you went through changes or what? Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I can answer that one, at least for myself. I sort of always wanted to go into journalism. So that was something it was always very clear for me. And then once I got to experience the, classes and learning, I just couldn't see myself in that traditional like reporter role. I just didn't feel like I had the personality for it, and just asking tough questions as a reporter just didn't feel natural. But I felt more comfortable on the back end and doing PR. So a little bit different than advertising. That's separate more in PR and communications. And, I got to flex that muscle, but in a little bit more thought out, strategic way than I felt like I could do on the as a reporter or a journalist. So for me, there was really no doubt, and it was just kind of happenstance that I fell into an internship fairly early. I was a sophomore, and so I worked pretty much my whole time through college, at least 20 hours a week, and going to school full time. And, I just kind of really, it was interesting to me to kind of dissect stories and messaging and really figuring out like what is newsworthy, what is resonating with journalists, and kind of marrying, there's always messaging or what clients want to be saying and messaging out there in the world, but then there's what the world is receptive to, and kind of bringing those two together and really kind of marrying them and figuring out ways that the clients can speak to what they want to, but in the context of what's really happening in the news cycle. So for me, I didn't feel like it was a struggle in any way. It was just a natural fit for me. I don't know if Annie or Nick have any other thoughts to share.
Yeah. I'm
Thanks.
gonna be honest. I thought being in public relations until the last minute. I felt like this was not the career for me. I had studied journalism. I was working in journalism in college, and I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't, well, let me say, first of all, when I was working in journalism, and I was working on, through a college course, a team with a WNYC reporter trying to investigate different issues with the Barclays Center. So basically, when it had been built, there were all these promises made to the community that it was living there that just went unfulfilled, and we were kind of helping this WNYC reporter try to figure out like what went wrong and why didn't these things ever get delivered on. So I was constantly on the phone with PR people, and I was like, these are the worst people I have ever spoken to in my entire life. And I just didn't want to do it. But then after college, when I got the original entry level job / internship, I felt like that was a temporary setback, and let me see if I can do something else. But I began to realize that you can affect a lot of change through public relations in a way that I feel like you couldn't always do in journalism, right? Because what you're doing as a PR professional is you're giving people a story that they might not otherwise have heard about. Now, journalists aren't always receptive to this. But I mean, we've worked with so many people. I can think of this woman who is working on how heat impacts gender. So extreme heat throughout the United States and throughout the world impacts gender. And they were doing and paying for a lot of these important reports and working with people on the ground in Ahmedabad, and women who were affected by the extreme heat, who, were going to go out and work in 150 degrees with a high humidity, because they wouldn't be able to make money otherwise. So we were able to, and what ended up happening was they had this scheme where they actually pay women not to go to work, because if it was dangerous for their health. We were able to bring that story out and connect them with really high level journalists that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. And this success story was able to be brought out to the world. And to me, even though I maybe 10 years ago wanted to be the journalist writing the story, being able to pitch and share that story at the end of the day, I think was really worth it to me.
Amazing. Thank you for such interested input. Let's go with Shayna Swain. If you could please unmute Shauna Swain, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Shauna Swain, and I am an advertising and marketing communications major junior year at FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. With the exception of Nick, Annie and Kavita spoke on how they kind of got their start in working with DEY or transitioning from journalism into PR. And it was kind of like, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. I want to know, and Nick, you can answer as well because somebody reached out to you from LinkedIn. So I'm curious to know what kind of sparked the conversation. Did you perfect your elevator pitch, so to speak, to kind of market yourself? And then Nick, like what were you posting on LinkedIn that made someone reach out to you in a sea of people, a sea of PR and journalists that made you marketable, so to speak, since it's such like a competitive market right now? We're not only competing with our peers, but we're competing with people who are older than us that are kind of looking for work in their preferred field. So I'm just curious on how you maneuvered that. Thank you.
Annie, would you like to start with that?
Sure. Since I have been looking for a new job around last year, I was like, you know what, I think I really hit my stride with writing and found a good rhythm. I was like, I really want to get back and really hone the craft of PR. So there were a lot of things that I did. I just became obsessive about LinkedIn, following communications professionals who I thought were people that I really wanted to emulate. People who really worked on big ideas, worked towards some sort of cause. So I would be trolling LinkedIn all day. I would be really curating my feed to make sure that I was going to certain events. So CenCom has so many amazing events. Get as many coffees with people as you can. You'll never understand how often your connections will come back to help you. Like this event that we're at right now. I knew my former boss, Dove Pedlosky of NYU Media Culture and Communication. She knows Kate Stanley, the Center for Communication Director, and this is how we all got involved. And it's just like a really great community of professionals to have in your back pocket, and make sure to foster those connections in a meaningful way. I know that it sounds like really silly, like platitudes or advice, but I can't tell you how many people in my past have come to help me now. Like when I was at the Times kind of working as an assistant, I kind of, was friendly with some journalists, and now they're covering some of the work that I'm pitching them. So that is something that is really important. When you're in the academic institutions, I would take advantage of all of the alumni resources you have. Go to as many networking events and dinners as you can. And in terms of a marketing or an elevator pitch, this is something that I'm sure Nick and Kavita can uh, attest to. PR people are sometimes the worst at telling people what they do. So that was my biggest goal when I was looking for a job. I'm like, I need to first tell my parents what I do because they have no idea. And then I think that will extend into helping me find a job. So I would say kind of map out your strengths, where you see yourself, and who you want to emulate. And you can kind of go from there. So if you want to get into marketing, PR, external communications, find people who are really good at talking about themselves, and then see how you can map yourself onto that. I hope that was helpful. And thank you for the thoughtful question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kavita, did you
I
want to
would
add
say
something?
too, very quickly, yeah, I mean, it's so funny because I've been in PR for almost 30 years. And I still think my parents don't really have a clear idea what I do. But I would say, also really follow along, as Annie said, on LinkedIn and things, industry people, what they are talking about, and the issues of what they're facing. You can hear the other side of it. You'll oftentimes come across PR people or journalists like railing against bad PR people or bad pitches they receive, or I can't believe. But I think that's only part of the story. I think a lot of really good journalists do appreciate thoughtful PR people, because I can't tell you how many times there are former journalists or producers who end up coming to the PR side, and then they kind of see the light. There is much more to our jobs than just writing emails and sending them out and harassing journalists. And, we've heard on multiple occasions, journalists that we are now sort of work with regularly who have made that transition and have confessed, we always thought that, hey, PR would be a really easy job. And, they come and they experience it and they find it's much more, I guess, cerebral than they think. There's the stereotype of PR people being PR, quote unquote, flacks, and that it doesn't really, take a whole lot of thought. And it's just like, but on the contrary, it's a lot. And so I would really, figure out follow along on LinkedIn and things, as Annie said, professionals and what they're really grappling with and talking about right now. One of the big things at the moment, I think, for a lot of industries, including ours, is how AI is entering the fray, and how in some ways it's going to make our jobs easier. In other ways, there's a fear of how it might replace some of the work that we do. It's a nuanced conversation. I think that there are definitely things that AI will ultimately take over, and that's okay. But I don't think it will fully ever replace humans, because I think a big part of what we do is also that human touch and relationships that's so important. I don't know, my path was a little bit strange too, because almost every job leap that I made came through a connection or a former colleague. So I worked with this wonderful woman. Her name was Hope Heyman. She's now retired. But, when I was at my first internship that I got in New York City, I worked with her and came across her, and she really, was my mentor in a lot of ways. So mentorship is important. If you can find somebody who can be that mentor for you, that's great. When she went on to her mid-sized agency, the first thing she did when she got, was there for a couple of months, was reach out to see if, when they had a job opening. She reached right out and said, I think it'd be perfect for you. And, that's when I was able to make my leap. And then she went to Edelman again. She reached out. And, I found my way into more senior positions in PR. So it really is, sometimes it is agencies that are looking for smart people and will reach out directly as they're recruiting. And other times it's, your advocates and mentors and people who are really committed to seeing you succeed in the career, who are kind of looking out for you and paving the way and creating those opportunities. So as Annie said, as many of those people that you can kind of interact with, and because you never know where they're going to turn up and what opportunities will come your way as a result of nurturing those relationships.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shayna. We're going to go with Caroline. If you could please unmute yourself and come up on screen. And I guess the biggest piece here was networking, and making sure that make sure that you build those relationships and stay connected with the right people. Oh, did we lose Caroline? Okay, there she is. If you could please, there we go.
Hi, how are you guys? My name is Caroline Good. I go to the new school, but I'm currently very interested.
Sorry, Caroline, we're not really able to hear you too well. You sound really far off.
Let me try my
Oh, that's way better.
Is that better? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So my name is Caroline. I go to the new school, but I'm currently weighing transferring to NYU. And I think this question would probably be directed at Annie, just because you said that you transferred to NYU. I was wondering if you found it worth it to transfer, and if you found it worth it to invest in your journalism education, or if you think that you would be able to do that outside of a good expensive education. And also, I know everyone has different financial situations, but I was wondering if you found any resources with paying for education that you would recommend looking into.
Thank you so much for your question. I'm going to punt this to Kavita, who transferred to NYU. I unfortunately spent 4 full years there.
Yeah, so I transferred I was at the University of New Hampshire for 1 year. Quite frankly, I mean, they had a great journalism program, but I decided, you know, I was out in the middle of Durham, New Hampshire, and I figured, you know, New York was the place to be if I wanted to pursue a career in journalism. So I definitely found it worth it. And I think, you know, there's 2 paths if you want to go into a career in PR. You know, there's the marketing communications sort of degree that you can pursue, and then there's the journalism side. And I'm really happy I did the journalism side because those skills parlay so well into PR, and you get to really understand the other side. And those are the folks that you're really trying to connect with the most in journalists. And so you get a more granular feel for what it is that journalists are facing on a day-by-day basis and what they're most interested in, for the sake of the stories that they're reporting on. You know, it's easy, you know, to fall into the trap of, you know, just trying to hear what your clients have to say and then dribbling out sort of more marketing messages and ad copy, things that are sort of advertorial. And we always say there's a difference. You know, if you're penning an article for a publication, it can't be, you know, overly promotional or self-congratulatory. It has to be more issues focused. And so I think it's helped me get a journalism degree, helped me kind of figure out, you know, the best way to approach journalists in the language and, you know, the motivations that they have. So I would definitely say, you know, if PR is a field that you're interested in, that New York is a great place to be. There's just a concentration of opportunities here. You know, it's a major, one of the world's major media markets, and there's, you know, journalism opportunities, but also very many PR opportunities. And this is just a small point, but if you have the chance to take a copy editing class, it's really helpful. It just really helps. It helps you act as an editor and allow you to edit your own work. And it's one of my regrets because I had an opportunity to take a copy editing class, and I didn't formally take it. And, you know, so I ended up doing copy editing through other classes like magazine writing or profile writing, but it wasn't a straight copy editing class, and it's just such a core skill. So just a little tip.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Caroline, for your great question. We have a full lineup of questions, so I'm just gonna quickly move to the next person. Emily, if you can please come on up, introduce yourself and unmute.
Hi, my name is Emily Lucana. I'm from NYU. I'm also a transfer student. I transferred from community college to NYU. I have a question regarding within like the topics within like the journalism slash publication industry. This could be open to everyone. What topics would you guys be more passionate about and tackling the most? And who would be clients that you would be open with working with as a result?
I see that Nick would like to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to work with clients really focused on democracy and human rights and areas around that. That was just coming from the political science background. I think, you know, if you're studying journalism in college, or that's something you're debating on doing, I think having a second major or minor in an area study can be really helpful. Because I think that it makes you more of an expert in a certain area. So you're able to like kind of niche in, whether you're working in journalism or in PR. But as far as clients go, I mean, God, who wouldn't? I would love to work with Human Rights Watch. I would love to work with the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, which does some really great work and research on peace throughout the world. I mean, there's a number of ones. I think also the other aspect of doing these area studies is you go to these events at different things. So through Hunter, I was constantly going to think tank events around New York. And you just meet people and you learn that these organizations exist that you had no idea existed. I met this woman at an Axios event in the fall who is a consultancy for like foreign ministers and Secretary of State on the subjects of war and peace. And they were like, yeah, we want our work to be out there more. Maybe we can talk about working together in the future. Had no idea this organization existed. I just assumed it was all in-house, but yeah, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Let's go with Phoebe. If you can please unmute yourself, put your camera on, and introduce your question.
My name's Phoebe. I go to NYU. I'm also media, culture, and communication student. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to speak with us. I was just wondering how you guys measure success on impact, or like how you define positive change and growth.
Annie, would you like to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. So that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, in the PR industry as a whole. One thing that has been so refreshing about working at DEY is that they don't rely on things that most other PR firms rely on. And those are these kind of things we call like vanity metrics. So that means that a broadcast placement or a print placement will give these kind of arbitrary inflated numbers that are more useful for people like in an advertising capacity or in a really quantitative capacity. In our field, we're focused on the qualitative work. So where did someone come in at a speaking engagement and what were the impacts of that? So I can punt this over to Kavita, who did amazing work with heat and gender, and her direct work in placing some of our clients resulted in like heads of state or political change. I don't know, Kavita, you could speak to it better, but influence is the number one kind of metric of success in our agency. It's different wherever you go. But that is something that I find to be the most refreshing, that we're not relying on these super inflated numbers that really are based on nothing. We're based on like actual change. Hey, there was a law that was made because one of our clients went on Fresh Air, MSNBC, talking about their topic. I can just speak about, my work at the Times. One of our journalists wrote a really moving piece about what happens with taxi cab medallions. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's amazing. Basically, taxi cab drivers around New York City were kind of being totally ripped off, and it created like severe strain on families and working class people of New York. That reporting went on to win a Pulitzer, but that's all good and great. What actually happened was that there was a law that was changed, and that this advocacy came forward to showcase the actual people who are being impacted by this. So yeah, we get all these shiny trophies and whatever, but I think for me personally, it's like, what is the actual impact on people? And I'll give this to Kavita, who's done amazing work in this space.
Yeah, so I think, and that is a key difference between marketing and advertising and PR. So I think marketing and advertising metrics are really based on how many eyeballs have viewed your work. And, the way that's figured out came from the very early days where there was some sort of weird conversion that was done about ad space or a space in a print newspaper. And so, for instance, if you had a mention in a 2-inch couple of paragraphs, trying to correlate that or figure out what the ad equivalency is, and that for a long time was sort of how you measured success in PR, and that's really not an accurate measure. So just one example that comes to mind of the kind of work that we try to do in PR is, back when COVID hit, we were working with the Rockefeller Foundation and working with the president, Dr. Rajiv Shah. And he was the former head of USAID, and he had spearheaded the crisis, Ebola crisis in Africa. And so he had a lot, a health background as well, a wealth of knowledge to parlay in how do we get out of the crisis. And it was during the first Trump administration. And even though he had connections to the White House, it was sort of a newer administration. And he was having a hard time, or the foundation was having a hard time kind of getting, in front of the people they needed to get to, because Rockefeller Foundation had sort of a plan to get ourselves out of the pandemic. And so we were able to connect Dr. Shah up with a New York Times columnist on the opinion desk. And it wasn't really his beat. His name was Benjamin Applebaum, but because we had a pre-existing relationship, he was actually a former client at DEY who had written an economics book. And we said, there is an economic component to this. I mean, how much money, economically are we going to lose if we can't see ourselves out of this pandemic? You should really speak to Raj. And so we connected Raj with Benjamin Applebaum, and he wrote a column. And it was that column that was seen that got Raj, a response from the White House that he was trying to. And so that's how we measure success in our industry. And it's really ephemeral. It's hard to put, metrics to. But most of the clients that we work with, it's like when, they know that PR is working for them when they start receiving inbound requests that they weren't getting otherwise, when they end up in a speaking on a panel and people are reaching out to them and saying, we saw you on this panel, you spoke about XYZ, it's so interesting, we're doing work. And it's really, that is what we're after in terms of measuring success. Now it's hard to quantify, but most of our clients understand it when they see it, and they can appreciate the value of the work that we do.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. Such a great, it's a way to measure impact, pretty much. Amazing. Thank you. We'll go with our next question, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. We have about 5 minutes left. We might go a little bit over, and we do have 3 more questions. So I want to make sure that we get to as many as possible. Mika, if you can please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and appear on camera. We'll love for you to ask the next question.
Hello, can you guys hear me correctly?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hello, my name is Damika Willis, and I'm currently a junior at Sam Houston State University. And my question was that, how do you nourish those connections? How do I explain this? How do you continue nourishing those relationships with connections, especially with professionals, especially as someone who lives not really too far from a major city? Well, I'm far from a major city. So how do you keep nourishing those connections, and how to kind of gain that confidence to make sure to keep in touch with them? Because I'm pretty introverted. So what advice do you guys have?
Yeah,
Nick?
I think that's something I definitely had a problem with as well. When I was first coming up, like, I think the biggest thing is just checking in on people. And not every email has to have like an ask or an offer in it. Just saying, hey, how are things? If you see something and think of them, like I have kept up with a professor from college for a while, and like our email exchanges are like, I will see something in the news. I'm like, oh, that made me think of you. Hope you're doing well. How's your wife? How's your kids? And then,
Okay.
a while down the line when you make those asks, it doesn't feel as out of the blue, or it feels as transactional. Just think of it as like you're keeping up with a friend, maybe a distant friend from home or something.
Thank you so much. It's always good to check the news to see maybe they launch a new book or they worked on something. And that was also a reminder for you to reach out to them and congratulate them. And it shouldn't always just be you asking for something. It should just be like, hi, how are you? Great to connect. So thank you so much, Nick and Mika, for your question.
Yeah,
We'll go
and
with
I would just add very quickly too, I mean, it could just even be following them on social media, liking things, commenting on things that they post about, just kind of keeping in their world and connected. That's also a easier lift in terms of just, maintaining contact.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll go with Nico.
Hello, I'm Nico. I'm a English major at Hunter College, so good to have a Hunter alumni on the call here. And I just wanted to ask what you would say the biggest difference is doing PR for nonprofits and big ideas, books, and things of that sort, as opposed to traditional corporate advertising products and services. And then I also had a specific question for Annie. I'm a writer myself, and I pretty much want to do what you do, have a day job in PR and do freelance writing on the side. So I was wondering if your job in PR helps you with your writing and vice versa, and if there are any maybe conflicts of interest that come into play when working in both those fields.
Sure, I'm happy to start with the second question. So I am able to balance both in a way that I'm very grateful for. I think right now I've just started my new job, so I've kind of put my freelance writing to the side a bit, but working and being able to write and be enmeshed in really big ideas all the time has made me a more creative, a more productive person. That has totally been helpful to my writing. In terms of, how to break into it, having a writing community is really important. If you have friends who are writers you can have that can help you be kept accountable. Because one thing about writers is that they love to talk about writing. Do they do it? No. So you have to have like a daily or a weekly practice. I highly recommend this writing class workshop. It's called Sackett Street or Gotham Writers Workshop. It's a really great space where you can work with people. I was in a class with someone who was 80 years old and then someone who was 22 years old, and we were working on memoir writing. And it was a really great place to have a community, to have a space where we went and were down to business, working on our writing. And that creativity and that exchange of ideas made me honestly a better PR professional. I would sometimes like sneak in. So where do you like get your news, and what influencers do you follow? And being involved in your community in a way that's creative and productive is so helpful towards your job in PR. In terms of conflict of interest, I will be honest, there often really is. You have to be super careful and super transparent when you're freelance writing, because as a PR person, you are an advocate for your clients or the organization that you work for. So my writing is usually about pop culture or is about memoir stuff, like silly things. But if I were to write like a really serious political piece and my client was directly opposed to that position, that would be a conflict of interest that we would have to kind of work out with the person who is employing me. So I would really think deeply about this is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, because you can think really deeply about, okay, these are the things that I want to write about. These are the things I care about. I kind of want that to transfer to my clients and a place where I want to work. So highly recommend really like doing an inventory of like, okay, here are places that I think my voice has a lot to offer. And here are clients who are already doing that. And it's a world that there's often a lot of tension, but there's a way that you can do it really artfully. And at some point, like your PR career is going to be more intense. So your writing might have to take a backseat. And then, hey, you're doing really well in PR. And then, oh, I can really focus on creative writing. So just know that it's going to ebb and flow. It cannot be 50-50 because the demands of PR are so intense and the demands of writing are also so intense. So hopefully that was helpful. I'm happy to also talk more if you'd like that. But yeah, good luck on everything. There's so many great like literary magazines for young writers that are a really great way to get started.
Yeah. The other thing I would add too is that there's obviously in PR, there is room for doing some ghostwriting if you really love writing and are not necessarily married to the idea of your name in the byline. There is a whole universe of even organizations out there whose sole, purpose is ghostwriting, speech writing, things like that. So you can exercise that muscle in that way. So you still get to write, but it might not be under your byline.
And just to go back to your first question, quickly, I think, nope, don't know what that was. Yeah, just super quickly, the biggest difference between product and nonprofit PR is just that in nonprofit PR, there is no product. And thus you kind of are a little more taken by the news cycle and what people are talking about than you might with product PR. When I was at my first firm, we were doing real estate. Like if there was a new building opening up or like some big company was signing a lease, that was more or less news in and of itself. Whereas working with the nonprofits, like there's 1,000 like food giveaways every day across America. Like it's a little harder to have some event be a story the way it could be for products and like real estate PR. You got to be a bit more like, here's where this fits into larger narratives that the world's thinking about. So like, I know we keep using this, like heat and gender. We're getting hits in the summer because it's hot in New York where the journalists are, or it's hot in London, and then this on people's minds. It just is a different way of going about it all.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nico, for your question. All right, I have one more question, Lexis, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So maybe we can take one or two more questions. If you do have, this is your last chance to raise your hand. Lexis, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your questions.
Okay, good evening from Ghana. So my name is Lexis Will. I'm a journalist and also a digital communications practitioner. I want your intake about this. So in Ghana or Africa per se, they don't employ a marketer, an advertiser, or a public relations practitioner. They want everything in one. So they mostly employ communications director or manager that you will be responsible for creating content, managing online platforms, engaging with the media, and so on and so forth. Is this something we should fight against, or we have to accept it with a good faith? So that's actually my first question. And then my second question is, as a PR practitioner, should we fear that AIs are going to take our jobs? Thank you.
Who wants to take this one?
No, we should not fear AI. I think AI can improve our lives. I think at the end of the day, there's a certain type of executive who wants to hear from a human being who's an expert. I mean, so many times I've used AI on different things, and then not trusted it. And I'm like, okay, it's great that you said that. Let me confirm it. I think that's the way a lot of people are going to approach it, like a trust and verify. And we are the verification, or like we're any sort of communications worker is going to be the verification. So it might give the idea of like, you should do X, Y, and Z for your communication strategy. I think that'll just open up a discussion of conversation rather than people signing off on it completely. I'm sure smaller organizations will want to use AI because they can't afford PR firms, but any organization that can afford a PR firm, afford a communications worker is going to want to keep someone around just to gut check and make sure that if something goes wrong, there's like a human being who can handle it.
Thank you so much, Lexis. We also have on our YouTube channel multiple panels and conversations around this, answering the similar questions. So I also encourage you to check it out. And I'd like to thank Kavita, Annie, and Nick for their time, as well as DEY for sharing all of your knowledge with all of us today. Thank you all for answering all of our questions and just being so mindful and teaching us so many things. Don't forget to, join us again, hopefully in person or live through our Instagram or Facebook page for Monday's panel. You can also re-watch this. We are recording live on Facebook, and we'll share it to our YouTube page for you all to go back, continue taking notes. And lastly, I hope to see all of the students back for our Media Career Summit on June 10th. So make sure you get those early bird tickets. Thank you again, Annie, Kavita, and Nick, for your time. And, we really appreciate DEY. The work that you guys are doing is so impactful, and we hope we continue this connection. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.